Marley was dead to begin with. That is the opening line of Charles Dickens' immortal Christmas classic, A Christmas Carol in Prose. Published finally in a single volume in 1843, it has become a standard, and for very, very good reasons. It is a magnificent example of Dickens' own just stratospherically amazing English prose style. The short story, well, actually it's a long story, short story. Technically, it's a novella. It was published in series form first, and then finally just in time for Christmas 1843. But it is so many things packed into one. It is a morality play. It is an ode to Christmas. It is a story of moral conversion. And it's been a family favorite of ours. I read it to my girls when they were little. Every Advent, first Sunday of Advent, we would sit down and read it. It is so witty, naturally funny. Dickens does this thing every once in a while where he'll break down the fourth wall and he'll do a witty aside to the reader, like, "Can you believe this?" Instead of saying the guy didn't know what time it was, Dickens will say, "The gentleman didn't know what o'clock it was." So very offbeat sense of humor and just sweethearted. There's a really good reason why it's been filmed many times. There are 4 or 5 famous film versions. There was a black and white version before the Alastair Sim version in the early 50s. Alastair Sim's portrayal of Ebenezer Scrooge, the main character, has, I think, colored the generations since, and their sort of a collective imagination of what Scrooge should look like. And then, of course, there was George C. Scott, and the Disney's A Christmas Carol from about 10 years ago starred Jim Carrey as multiple characters, including Scrooge and all the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. I think there's that movie has a lot going for it as well. Bob Zemeckis directed Disney's A Christmas Carol. As much as I have to admit it, it's got some pretty charming, and visuals are beautiful. And one of my favorite actors is in it. Gary Oldman plays Bob Cratchit and some other characters as well. So there's a good reason why so many filmmakers and TV directors have wanted to adapt this prose story into visual format. But remember, the title is meant to be a song. I think A Christmas Carol kind of flops trippingly off our tongue, but a carol is a hymn or an ode to Christmas. And what Dickens has done is he's written a song without music, which is why the 5 chapters that make up the novella are called staves, like musical staves. Ebenezer Scrooge is at the beginning of the story just as cold on the inside as the London fog, freezing weather is on Halloween on the Freudian slip. Christmas Eve is on the outside. It's London. It's the 1840s era, so it's Industrial Revolution. And Charles Dickens had a very acute social conscience when it came to children and children's rights. He opposed child labor law, sanctions against children. Basically, children were glorified slaves at that time, working in factories. He himself had done a stint as a child. So the theme of downtrodden youth yearning for dignity and freedom is a sub-theme of a lot of Charles Dickens books, like David Copperfield and stories like that. We interrupt this podcast for a bit of magic. Now, I can read your mind. I'm hacking in. You're getting very sleepy. I can tell you have not subscribed to this channel. Hit the like button. Subscribe. It helps me grow. It helps you connect with me so you don't have to search for it. You don't have to read my mind about how to get to you and vice versa. So like and subscribe. Let's grow together. And now back to the podcast. Actually, I don't feel too well. Sorry you had to see that. Back to the show. This is a story of religious and moral conversion. Scrooge at the beginning has to undergo a kind of spiritual death before he wakes up to what's really important. And the first of the deaths happen, ironically, through a look in his past to the happiness that he enjoyed as a little boy, thanks to the ministrations of the first ghost, the ghost of Christmas past. And who warns him about the ghost of Christmas past and kind of is the harbinger, the forerunner of the 3 ghosts, is his dead partner, Jacob Marley. Hence, Marley was dead to begin with. That's how the story begins. So Marley was his partner in financial malfeasance, malfeasance is not the right word. Usury, money lending. There was an undisclosed, undefined financial business that Scrooge was in. We're not exactly sure what he did. Probably some kind of banking or loaning, lending. And Marley had died 7 years past, also on Christmas Eve. So when Scrooge leaves his office, he makes fun of Bob Cratchit, his underpaid and overworked clerk, and complains that he's going to have to pay him another day for work not done. And that's when he's visited, Scrooge is, by Jacob Marley. And Jacob Marley's ghost is chained to boxes of gold. He is in a kind of slavery after death and destined to roam the earth instead of being free. And so Jacob Marley offers him a cautionary tale. He's trying to get him to stop doing what he's doing because, Scrooge, you're going to end up like me. So this sets the tone of the story because the Ghost of Christmas Present gets to see some of the present moment issues, circumstances, like the home of Fred, his nephew, who's making merry at Christmas time, and Scrooge gets to overhear how they talk about him. And that's when he realizes, people don't like me. And then he figures out why. The next scene is the Cratchit home, and we learn that Tiny Tim, the little crippled boy, is not doing well. And this is when the Ghost of Christmas Present, in segueing to the Ghost of Christmas to come in the future, suggests to Scrooge that little Tiny Tim is going to die. And this really vexes his spirit because before this, he doesn't care about anyone, really, certainly not Tiny Tim. But seeing him in this vision and seeing his bed empty and the family mourning makes Scrooge obsessed with whether that's a vision of something that will happen or something that may happen. And then Scrooge learns that it's on him. He can choose a different course in his life. So there's the stick, which is the warning from the terrifying vision of Jacob Marley's ghost. Then there's the carrot, not wanting to harm the beautiful innocence of Tiny Tim and wanting to preserve Tim's life. So throughout the visitations in which the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, they take Scrooge kind of preternaturally, even though it seems that days and weeks, maybe longer, transpire in his spirit during these experiences. At the final stave, when Scrooge has had enough, he's just at the limit of terror and realizing he's got his whole life wrong. He's been on the wrong track his entire life. Then he wakes up, bam, he's on the floor. He's in his room, but this time it's not a dank, dark room with gruel and a fireplace that barely throws any heat. It's the bright sun of Christmas morning. So all of that time was compressed into the dreamlike experience that happened in one night, spread over however long the action takes place, past, present, and future ghost visitations by Scrooge, with Scrooge. And if you're not at least shedding a tear or having a lump in your throat, you better check your pulse because you might be dead. This is one of the most emotionally satisfying endings of any story. It's such a great contrast of darkness to light and a poverty to true riches. And I think, although not consciously, Philip Van Doren Stern may have used ideas from Dickens' A Christmas Carol in Prose for his original story called The Greatest Gift. The Greatest Gift was a Christmas circular, 23 pages long, that Stern received while shaving in February 1938. It just kind of came to him. And that ended up at RKO Studios, and that became the basis for a script written by Frances Hackett and her husband, Joe Zwirling, Cliff Odets, and Frank Capra. And that movie was called It's a Wonderful Life. You can see sort of parallel themes of rich man, handicap, death, suicide about the end, and then a big upward bounce at the end. Now, there's no conscious homage to A Christmas Carol in Prose in It's a Wonderful Life, but you can see the common themes. And they tap into us because they're primal. We all know what it's like to be on the wrong track to various degrees. We all know what it's like to see the difference between vice and virtue. And it's beautiful to see this story arc and the character learning experience that Ebenezer Scrooge undergoes, and we undergo it vicariously watching this story. Many witty asides, many word plays and just rich. There's almost the spirit of Christmas itself in this book, this novella. After it was published, it was a huge hit, and Dickens created an abridged version that he would read in public. He would go to public settings, almost like an amateur actor reading all the voices. He did this 127 times before he died. And Dick Van Dyke came to my hometown north of Los Angeles when my girls were little. And I had some other engagement, and I came this close to going to Dick Van Dyke at a local library. And for some reason, I didn't do it. There was something else going on. I don't remember the details, but I've kicked myself every time I realize Dick Van Dyke is a national treasure and how amazing. So if Dick Van Dyke or anyone like that, a living legend, comes near your house, go. This was free, and I still missed it. It reminds me of Dickens' habit of reading his own book. So faith-wise, Dickens had 10 children. He was married a long time to his first wife. That marriage ended, and he remarried. And he was haunted, I would say, by the Spirit of God. You can see religious themes in a lot of his novels. Lord Jim, Bleak House, Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, and so on. And I want to share something that he wrote in a letter that he sent to his friend in the year, he wrote it from Genoa, Italy, while on vacation. This is September 30th, 1844. So it's the year after A Christmas Carol had come out. It is already a success. And he wrote it to his friend John Forster. And this is what he tells. I'm just going to read literally what Dickens wrote to his friend. Let me tell you of a curious dream I had last Monday night, and of the fragments of reality I can collect, which helped to make it up. I've had a return of rheumatism in my back, and knotted round my waist like a girdle of pain, and had lain awake nearly all that night under the infliction, when I fell asleep and dreamed this dream. In an indistinct place, which was quite sublime in its indistinctness, I was visited by a spirit, capital S. I could not make out the face, nor do I recollect that I desired to do so. It wore a blue drapery, as the Madonna might in a picture by Raphael, and bore no resemblance to anyone I've ever known except in stature. I think, but I'm not sure, that I recognized the voice. Anyway, I knew it was poor Mary's spirit. Now, Mary was his sister-in-law, Mary Hogarth, who had already passed away. I was not afraid at all, but in great delight, so that I wept very much, and stretching out my arms to it, called it dear. At this, I thought it recoiled, and I felt immediately that, not being of my gross nature, I ought not to have addressed it so familiarly. Forgive me, I said. We poor living creatures are able only to express ourselves by looks and words. I've used the word most natural to our affections, and you know my heart. So he's explaining to this spirit, this woman dressed in blue like the Madonna, that he didn't mean to be so casual, so familiar. It was so full of compassion and sorrow for me, it being the spirit, which I knew spiritually, for, as I have said, I didn't perceive its emotions by its face, that it cut me to the heart. And I said, sobbing, "Oh, give me some token that you've really visited me." "Form a wish," it said. I thought, reasoning with myself, if I form a selfish wish, it will vanish. So I hastily discarded such hopes and anxieties of my own as came into my mind, and I said, "Mrs. Hogarth is surrounded with great distresses. Observe, I never thought of saying your mother as to a mortal creature. Will you extricate her?" "Yes." "And her extrication is to be a certainty to me that it has really happened?" "Yes." "But answer me one other question," I said, in an agony of an entreaty, lest it should leave me. "What is the true religion?" As it paused a moment without replying, I said, good God, in such an agony of haste, lest it should go away, I said, "You think as I do that the form of religion doesn't really greatly matter if we try to do good? Or," I said, observing that it still hesitated, so the spirit's now hesitating, trying to give him an answer, and was moved with the greatest compassion for me, "perhaps the Roman Catholic is the best? Perhaps it makes one think of God oftener and believe in him more steadily?" It's the question Dickens asks, should I become Catholic? "For you," said the spirit, full of such heavenly tenderness for me, that I felt as if my heart would break. "For you, it is the best." Then I awoke. with the tears running down my face and myself in exactly the condition of the dream. It was just dawn. I called up Kate and repeated it 3 or 4 times over that I might not unconsciously make it plainer or stronger afterwards. It was exactly this. Now, this is a remarkable prophetic dream / vision. It made him cry. He woke up with tears in his eyes streaming down his face. Mary Hogarth, yeah, that could have been the triggering human hook for this encounter. But I think we can have some more or less firm hope that he did have a visitation from the Blessed Virgin Mary, who encouraged him to become Catholic. I don't know if anything's written about his spiritual second half of his life. This happened in his 50s. I don't know. But I do know that A Christmas Carol in Prose is so suffused with God's Spirit. It's so full of wisdom and mercy. And you see the human lines of all the decisions that Ebenezer Scrooge makes and where they ended up. And they would have ended up exactly in the place of Jacob Marley or worse, had he not had the encounter with the three spirits, especially the one that has the biggest flaming darts of truth is the final spirit, the spirit of Christmas to come. And that's when a lot of the words he ate, like he has no problem with child labor factories and workhouses because it might remove the surplus population. Then he has an encounter with two very disturbing looking children ghosts called Want and Need. And he regrets everything he said. And in the end, he has this great upward bounce. He makes merry. He visits the portly gentleman, but this time, instead of rebuffing them as he did on Christmas Eve the night before, he gives them a mind-blowingly generous Christmas donation. And Dickens wisely doesn't tell us what the number is, but we can fill in the blanks. It was probably like a stupendous amount of money. And then at the end, we learn from Bob Cratchit that no one kept Christmas better than Ebenezer Scrooge, the most unlikely Christmas convert of all. If you can get a copy with the John Leach illustrations, all the better. Of course, you can find a Kindle copy, but I think this is a book to sit in your lap in front of a crackling fire with a hot beverage, and maybe loved ones of all ages will absolutely love. If you've had no experience reading, and start early, you don't want to start on Christmas Eve. It's a wonderful book to share with your family or yourself in Lent. Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol in Prose. And if this is the kind of thing you like talking about and thinking about, consider joining the True North Movement. That's our international digital community where we talk about faith and reason and hope and mindset, and we expose false media narratives, and we have a book club as well. Join us. We'd love to have you and learn from you. Be a saint. What else is there? And Merry Christmas.